I always believed in structure and routine, in the comfort of knowing exactly how my life would unfold. For 15 years, I built something solid, a successful career, a house by the coast, and a marriage that, to me, felt unshakable. Charlotte and I had weathered storms before: financial struggles in the early years, family pressures, job relocations. Through it all, we had each other. Or at least, that's what I thought. That morning started like any other. I was standing by the kitchen counter, methodically spreading peanut butter on a slice of toast while scrolling through my emails. The soft hum of the ocean outside mixed with the rhythmic ticking of the wall clock. My mind was preoccupied with the upcoming presentation I had at the university, an extensive report on rising ocean temperatures and their effects on coastal ecosystems. I had just reached for my coffee when I heard her footsteps descending the stairs. Heels. That was the first thing that felt off. Charlotte rarely wore heels this early in the morning, let alone around the house. "Morning," I said without looking up, expecting her usual half-awake murmur as she fumbled for coffee. Instead, I was met with silence. I glanced up and froze. Charlotte stood in the doorway, dressed in a form-fitting black dress, her makeup flawless, her hair styled with the kind of effort she usually reserved for high-profile work events. Something about the way she stood, arms crossed, a strange expression on her face, made the air in the room feel heavier. "What's the occasion?" I asked, forcing a chuckle, trying to shake off the sudden unease creeping into my chest. She exhaled, tilting her head slightly. "We need to talk, Lucas." Something in her tone sent an icy shiver down my spine. I placed my coffee down carefully, studying her face. "All right," I said, keeping my voice even. "What's going on?" She hesitated for a fraction of a second. Then, with an unnatural calmness, she said, "I'm leaving. There's someone else." For a moment, I thought I'd misheard. The words felt foreign, impossible, like a language I didn't understand. "What?" I said, the absurdity of it making my voice come out almost like a laugh. Charlotte sighed as if she were growing impatient. "I've been seeing someone else for a while now. His name is Derek Montgomery." Derek Montgomery. The name hit me like a fist to the stomach. I knew who he was, a wealthy real estate developer, the kind of man who flaunted power and money like they were personality traits. I had met him once, briefly, at a charity event Charlotte had insisted we attend. He had shaken my hand with an air of superiority, flashing a grin that now made me want to break something. I swallowed hard, my throat suddenly dry. "You're serious?" Charlotte nodded, her expression unreadable. The room around me blurred for a second, a ringing in my ears making it hard to focus. I gripped the edge of the counter, grounding myself. My wife, my Charlotte, was standing there, telling me in the most casual way possible that she was walking out of our life, our marriage, our home. My voice was hoarse when I finally spoke. "You're leaving me for him?" "Yes." No hesitation. No second-guessing. I let out a slow breath, willing my pulse to steady. "And you just decided to tell me now? After how many months?" "Years." Charlotte's eyes flickered, but only for a second. "It doesn't matter. What matters is that I'm done pretending." Pretending. The word stung more than I wanted to admit. I clenched my jaw, forcing myself to remain calm. "So that's it? 15 years, and you're just walking out. I think you know we haven't been happy for a while." I barked a bitter laugh. "Funny, I don't remember being asked about that." She glanced toward the window. "Derek's outside. I don't want to drag this out." I followed her gaze, my stomach twisting into knots. Sure enough, parked in our driveway was a sleek black car, Derek's. He was waiting, like this was some kind of transaction, like my marriage was something he could just take possession of. Something inside me snapped. I straightened, my voice turning cold. "You don't even have the decency to do this alone?" Charlotte's lips pressed into a thin line. "I didn't want a scene." I laughed, shaking my head in disbelief. "A scene? You're standing here, telling me my marriage is over like it's a business deal, and you think I'm the one who might cause a scene." She sighed, checking her watch. "I don't want to fight, Lucas." I stared at her, waiting for something, an explanation, a trace of guilt, a flicker of hesitation. But she just stood there, poised and distant, like she had already erased me from her life. A realization hit me then, cold and undeniable. She wasn't just leaving. She had already left, mentally and emotionally, long before today. "Go," I said finally, my voice empty. "If this is what you want, just go." For the first time, something shifted in her expression. A flash of something, regret, doubt? But it was gone as quickly as it came. She reached for her purse and walked toward the door without another word. The front door swung open, and as she stepped outside, Derek got out of the car, grinning as if he had one. My hands clenched into fists at my sides, but I refused to give him the satisfaction of a reaction. Charlotte paused for a second before getting into the car. For a fleeting moment, I thought she might look back. But she didn't. The car doors shut. The engine purred to life. And just like that, she was gone. The silence that followed was deafening. I stood frozen in the kitchen, the half-eaten slice of toast still in my hand, staring at the space she had occupied just moments ago. 15 years. Gone in under 5 minutes. I wasn't sure how long I stood there, but eventually my body moved on autopilot. I sat down heavily at the dining table, my mind replaying every second of the conversation, every inflection in her voice, every word that had shattered the life I thought I had. Then, as if the universe hadn't quite finished with me yet, my phone vibrated against the table. I reached for it, still numb, expecting another blow. It was an email. From Charlotte. My stomach twisted as I opened it. It was from her lawyer. The subject line read, "Divorce Proceedings and Asset Division." She hadn't even been gone an hour, and she was already making her next move. My breath came out slow and controlled, my fingers tightening around the phone. This wasn't just a betrayal. This was an execution. And I was the fool who never saw it coming. I don't know how long I sat there, staring at the email Charlotte had sent. The words blurred together, the weight of it all pressing down on me like a lead blanket. Divorce Proceedings and Asset Division. She had planned this. She had planned every goddamn second of it. The conversation in the kitchen, Derek waiting outside, the cold way she told me it was over. It wasn't a spontaneous decision. It was an execution. I should have been furious. Maybe part of me was. But mostly, I felt hollow. My hands trembled as I shut my laptop. If I kept staring at it, I might throw it through the window. I needed answers. The silence in the house was unbearable, so I grabbed my keys and left. It wasn't until I was already behind the wheel, aimlessly driving down the coastal highway, that I realized where I was heading. I walked into the university lab, the overhead fluorescent lights buzzing faintly. A few researchers were already at their desks, lost in their work. They barely glanced at me. I was grateful for that. I found Samantha Reed at her usual spot, hunched over her computer, a half-empty coffee cup beside her. She was focused, typing rapidly, but the moment she saw me standing there, she stopped. Her eyes flickered with something concern, maybe guilt. "Lucas," she said softly. I swallowed. "How long?" She sighed, closing her laptop. "Come with me." We stepped into a small office, away from prying ears. She shut the door behind us and leaned against the desk, crossing her arms. "I didn't know how to tell you," she admitted. "I figured it wasn't my place." "Just say it." Samantha hesitated. I knew Charlotte was seeing someone. The words felt like a slap, even though I already knew. Hearing it from someone else made it real in a way that even her own confession hadn't. "How long?" My voice was hoarse. "At least a year. Maybe longer." "A year." I clenched my jaw, my mind spinning. A year of lies. A year of sharing a bed with someone who was already planning her exit. Samantha bit her lip. "Lucas, that's not the worst part." I stiffened. "What do you mean?" She turned to her computer, clicking through a few files. "I found something last week. I wasn't sure if I should tell you, but now." She turned the screen toward me. I stepped forward, scanning the documents. My name. My goddamn name was all over them. Legal agreements, financial transfers, property deals. Deals I had never even heard of. I felt sick. "What the hell is this?" Samantha exhaled. "I think Charlotte's been using your identity for real estate transactions. I don't know how deep it goes, but..." I backed away, running a hand through my hair. Jesus Christ. It wasn't just an affair. It wasn't just her leaving. She had been setting me up. I turned back to Samantha. "Who else knows about this?" Her lips pressed together. "The university's finance department flagged some irregularities, but nothing's official yet. If this goes public, Lucas, it could ruin you." Ruin me. Charlotte hadn't just walked away from our marriage. She had set fire to everything and left me standing in the ashes. I forced myself to breathe. "I need proof." Samantha hesitated. "I have a contact. Madeline Foster. Private investigator. She's good, really good." I nodded, jaw tight. "Call her." The drive home felt longer than usual. The roads were empty, the ocean stretching endlessly to my right. I tried to remember the last time Charlotte had looked at me the way she must have looked at Derek. Had there been a moment, even in the last few months, where she hesitated? Where she felt guilty? I couldn't remember one. When I pulled into my driveway, I knew something was off. The porch light was on, casting a pale glow over the front door. And there, wedged into the frame, was a business card. I grabbed it and turned it over. Montgomery Development Group. Derek Montgomery, CEO. A chill ran down my spine. A message. He wanted me to know he had been here. I clenched the card in my fist and pushed the door open. The house was quiet. Too quiet. I checked every room, every drawer. Nothing was missing. Nothing out of place. But I couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been here. I stood in the center of the living room, my pulse steadying. If they thought I was just going to lie down and take this, they were dead wrong. I pulled out my phone and dialed the number Samantha had given me. It rang twice before a voice answered. Madeline Foster. This is Lucas Bennett, I said. I need your help. A pause. What's the situation? My wife left me this morning, I said, my voice ice cold. And I just found out she's been using my name for fraudulent business deals. Another pause. Then, I'll be there in an hour. I hung up and exhaled. This wasn't just about my marriage anymore. This was war. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the business card Derek had left behind, flipping it between my fingers. It wasn't just arrogance. It was a message, a warning, a reminder that he was ahead of me. At some point, exhaustion took over, and I dozed off with my head resting on my folded arms. A sharp knock at the door jolted me awake. I checked my phone, 7:58 a.m. Right on time. I stood, running a hand through my hair before walking to the door. When I opened it, a woman in a leather jacket and dark jeans stood there, her arms crossed. Her eyes, sharp and calculating, studied me before she gave a small nod. Lucas Bennett. I nodded. Madeline Foster? She stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. Samantha told me what's going on. You're in deep, and from what I can tell, you don't even know how deep yet. I shut the door behind her, suddenly feeling like I was about to get even worse news than I'd already received. Let's sit down, she said, already pulling out a laptop and a notepad from her bag. I started digging last night after Samantha's call. I followed her into the kitchen, my pulse steady but my hands slightly clammy. I wasn't sure I was ready to hear what she'd found, but there was no turning back now. She flipped open her laptop, pulled up a folder, and turned the screen toward me. This is what I found in less than 12 hours. If I had a week, I'd probably uncover a whole empire. My stomach tightened. The first document she clicked on was a real estate contract. I recognized the name of the development, Montgomery Shoreline Project. The same one Charlotte had mentioned in passing months ago, when she'd been talking about some big career move. Except this contract had my name on it. My signature. My supposed agreement to a business partnership with Derek Montgomery. My blood turned to ice. That's forged. Madeline nodded like she had expected that answer. Of course it is. But it's damn convincing. Whoever did it had access to enough of your documents to replicate your signature almost perfectly. I exhaled slowly, gripping the edge of the table. She clicked through several other files, wire transfers, loan agreements, even tax filings. All tied to me. All pointing to the idea that I had been financially involved in Derek's projects for years. They're setting me up, I muttered. They already have, Madeline corrected. This paper trail? If it ever goes public, it'll look like you were not just involved, but one of the masterminds. A dull pressure built behind my eyes. Charlotte hadn't just walked away. She had detonated a bomb and left me standing in the wreckage. I forced my voice to stay level. How do I prove I wasn't part of this? Madeline leaned back in her chair, tapping her pen against the table. We need to find where the real money leads. Fraud like this doesn't exist in a vacuum. If they're using your name, they're covering their own tracks. We just need to find out where the money actually went. She paused, narrowing her eyes. How much do you know about Derek Montgomery's business? Not much, I admitted. Just that he's a real estate developer. He builds overpriced resorts and golf courses. Madeline smirked. That's the clean version. The reality? He's been under investigation twice before. Both cases mysteriously disappeared before charges were filed. Bribery, environmental violations, shell companies. His entire empire is built on loopholes and payoffs. I rubbed my temples. And now my name is tangled up in it. Exactly. A heavy silence filled the room. Finally, I spoke. So what do we do? Madeline tapped on her keyboard. First, we trace the money. Find the accounts Charlotte and Derek don't want anyone looking at. Second, we get ahead of them. If this all comes crashing down, we need to make sure you don't go down with them. I inhaled deeply, trying to process the mess I was in. And how do we do that? She gave me a slow, knowing smile. We make them panic. The first move was easy. We needed leverage, something that would rattle Charlotte and Derek enough to make them slip up. Madeline had pulled financial records linking Montgomery Development Group to offshore accounts. The amounts weren't small. Millions. Money funneled through properties and shell companies before disappearing into investments. Charlotte's name isn't on these, I noted. Not directly, Madeline said. But there's one connection we can exploit. She slid another document in front of me. A list of Charlotte's recent purchases, expensive jewelry, a new car, even a down payment on a luxury condo. Paid for in cash. I exhaled sharply. She's laundering Derek's money. Madeline nodded. It's not obvious at first glance, but look at the patterns. Money moves out of Montgomery Development, disappears into a fake consulting firm, and then, poof, it turns into Charlotte's new lifestyle. It was genius. And it was going to bury her if we played it right. Now, Madeline said, closing her laptop, we let her know we know. I sent Charlotte a simple text. We need to talk. You've been busy, haven't you? She read it almost immediately. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. Then, finally, a response. I have nothing to say to you, Lucas. I smirked. There it was. The first sign of fear. That's fine, I replied. I'll talk to someone else then. Maybe the IRS. Or the SEC. I'm sure they'd love to hear about your new condo. This time, she responded in seconds. Where are you? Bingo. I glanced at Madeline, who was already smirking. She took the bait. I typed one final message. Meet me at the house. 1 hour. Charlotte didn't reply, but I knew she'd come. An hour later, I heard her car pull into the driveway. She walked inside like she still owned the place, her designer sunglasses perched on her head, her expression somewhere between pissed off and nervous. I leaned against the counter, arms crossed. Nice condo, I said casually. Her jaw tightened. What do you want, Lucas? I let the silence stretch, watching her. Then I pulled out the file Madeline had given me and slid it across the counter. I think you already know. She flipped it open. I saw her expression shift, first confusion, then realization. And then, just for a fraction of a second, fear. You don't know what you're talking about, she said, but her voice wavered. Don't I? I asked. Because it looks like you've been busy moving money around. You and Derek. Tell me, Charlotte, how long were you planning this? She snapped the folder shut, her eyes flashing. You have no idea what you're getting yourself into, Lucas. I leaned in. Neither do you. For the first time, she looked uncertain. I let the moment hang before delivering the final blow. You're going to help me fix this, I said. Or I promise you, when this all falls apart, you'll be the first one to take the fall. She stared at me, her nails digging into the folder in front of her. And for the first time since she walked out that door, I saw it, real fear. I smiled. Now, the game had really begun. Charlotte sat across from me, gripping the folder so tightly her knuckles turned white. I could see it now, the cracks in the armor, the way her breathing was just a little too shallow, her eyes darting toward the door like she was weighing whether to run. She was scared. Good. I leaned back against the counter, arms crossed. I should let you drown in this. Her jaw tightened. You don't mean that. I tilted my head, studying her. Don't I? She let out a shaky breath, looking down at the table. For a moment, she just sat there, silent. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer than I expected. I didn't want this to happen like this. I laughed bitterly. Yeah? How exactly did you picture it, Charlotte? Me just quietly accepting the divorce while you and Derek ride off into the sunset with my money and my name. Her eyes flicked up, and for the first time in this entire mess, I saw something I hadn't expected, guilt. No, I wasn't going to fall for that. You don't get to act like you regret this, I said, voice low. You made your choice. I thought. She swallowed hard, struggling with the words. I thought it wouldn't get this bad. Right. I exhaled slowly, shaking my head. That's the problem with people like you. You think you can control the damage. You think you can set fire to someone's life and somehow, magically, only burn the parts you don't want anymore. She flinched. Good. Let her feel even an ounce of the devastation she left me with. But then something shifted. She lifted her chin slightly, eyes clearing, like she had just decided something. I want out, she said. I frowned. Excuse me. I want out of this. I want away from Derek, from everything. She leaned forward. And you need me, Lucas. Whether you want to admit it or not. I stared at her, waiting for the punchline. You need me? You. The woman who just spent a year making sure I took the fall for your mess. She shook her head. I never meant for that to happen. Derek did. He started making decisions without me. At first, it was just supposed to be a way to secure our future, but then the money started moving faster, and I started seeing less of it. He's hiding things from me, too. I let that sit between us for a moment. Charlotte was always good at this, twisting the truth just enough to make herself seem like the victim. And maybe, for the first time, she actually was one. But I wasn't going to give her the benefit of the doubt. Not anymore. She exhaled slowly. Lucas, if this all falls apart, he won't go down alone. My stomach turned, but I forced myself to stay still. What do you mean? Her voice was barely above a whisper. Derek's been preparing for the worst. If anything happens, if the authorities start closing in, he has a backup plan. I leaned forward. And what's that? She swallowed. You. My blood ran cold. Charlotte reached into her bag and pulled out another folder, sliding it across the table. These are documents he showed me last week. A last resort, he called it. I opened the folder, and my stomach dropped. There it was. A full financial trail leading directly to me. Offshore accounts, wire transfers, a paper trail that would make it look like I had been the one orchestrating everything. My hands curled into fists. He was always planning to throw me under the bus, I muttered. She nodded. And now, I think he's accelerating the timeline. I closed the folder and exhaled through my nose. Why are you telling me this? Because, she said, voice steady. If Derek goes down, I don't want to go down with him. And if I help you stop him, I want protection. I let out a dry, humorless chuckle. So that's what this is. You want me to save you. Her gaze didn't waver. I want to make things right. I laughed again, shaking my head. There is no making this right, Charlotte. You destroyed everything. Her lips parted slightly, but for once, she didn't have a response. Good. Let her sit with it. Let her feel something. I leaned forward, placing my hands on the table. You want my help? Fine. But I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing this for me. And when this is over, when Derek is finished, so are you. Her throat bobbed as she swallowed, but she nodded. I stood up, pushing the folder toward her. Tell me everything. Every deal, every dollar, every lie you've told to cover this up. She hesitated for just a second before she finally started talking. And I sat there, listening, waiting. Because now it was my turn to take control. Charlotte sat across from me, gripping the edges of the chair like she was bracing for impact. Her fingers tapped against the wooden surface of the table, a nervous habit I hadn't seen in years. I should have hated her. I should have wanted her to suffer. But the look in her eyes, raw, desperate, made it impossible to feel anything but exhaustion. I didn't come here to beg, she said, voice low. I scoffed. Then why are you here? She hesitated, chewing the inside of her cheek like she was picking apart her own thoughts. Because I know how this ends. I've seen Derek do it before. The second he thinks someone is a liability, they disappear. I frowned. Disappear. She nodded, swallowing hard. Not in the way you think. He doesn't have people killed, Lucas. He ruins them. He makes sure they have nothing left, no money, no future, no reputation. He finds their weakness and he exposes it. I clenched my jaw, a cold feeling settling in my stomach. And you think you're next? She exhaled sharply. I know I am. I leaned back, arms crossed. You're expecting sympathy from me? Charlotte shook her head. No. She hesitated, then looked up at me with something like honesty in her eyes. I just want to survive this. For the first time since she walked through my door, I saw it fear. Not fear of me. Not even fear of losing her perfect life. Fear of Derek. I let that settle between us. For months, I had seen him as just another rich, arrogant bastard. Someone who stole my wife and played with other people's lives like they were nothing. But now, I saw the truth. Derek wasn't just powerful. He was dangerous. And Charlotte, smart, ruthless, always in control Charlotte, had finally realized she was in over her head. I sighed, rubbing a hand over my face. You said he's moving money. She nodded. Yes. But there's one account he hasn't touched yet. I narrowed my eyes. Why? Her fingers curled into fists. Because it's in my name. Silence. I inhaled slowly. So if it all goes to hell, he can pin it on you. She gave a hollow laugh. That was the plan all along, wasn't it? First, it was you. Now, it's me. I let out a slow breath, my mind racing. Derek had set this up perfectly. He had built his empire on other people's names, other people's risks. And when the walls started closing in, he would walk away clean, leaving the rest of us to burn. Charlotte leaned forward. If we can pull the transaction history before he transfers the funds, we'll have proof. Enough to take him down. I studied her carefully. And what do you get out of this? She flinched slightly, but her voice was steady. A way out. I exhaled, shaking my head. You really think you can just walk away from this? She looked down, gripping the edge of the table. I don't know. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't lying. That scared me more than anything. I sighed, rubbing my temples. Fine. I'll help you. Charlotte blinked, looking almost surprised. But let's get something straight, I said, voice cold. I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing this for me. Her throat bobbed as she swallowed, nodding once. I stood up, pushing away from the table. Tell me everything. Every deal. Every account. Every lie you've told to cover this up. She hesitated for just a second before finally speaking. And as I listened, I realized something. Derek Montgomery had made a fatal mistake. He had underestimated me. And now? Now, I was going to bring him down. Charlotte's hand shook as she stared at the screen, the last numbers transferring, the proof of Derek's crimes downloading in real time. I could hear her breathing, shallow and quick, like she had just run a marathon but still didn't know if she had one. Then she froze. A sound in the hallway. Footsteps. Her eyes snapped to mine, wide with terror. I didn't hesitate. I reached for her wrist, pulling her toward the door, but before we could move, Derek walked in. For a moment, everything stopped. Charlotte was stiff beside me, and Derek, he just stood there, watching us like a man who had seen this coming for miles. I expected rage. I expected shouting. But instead, he just smirked. Charlotte, he said, voice smooth as ever. I have to say, I'm a little disappointed. She swallowed hard, glancing at me. Derek's gaze followed hers, and something darker flickered in his expression. Ah, of course. Lucas. The devoted husband, back from the dead. I kept my voice even. You underestimated me. His smirk widened. No, he said softly. I just thought you'd stay predictable. Charlotte took a step back. Derek, listen. He turned toward her, something sharp in his eyes. Listen? To what? Another excuse? Another lie. Her breath hitched, and for the first time, I saw it. She wasn't afraid because she had been caught. She was afraid because she knew what he was capable of. I stepped in front of her, squaring my shoulders. It's over. We have everything. The transactions, the accounts, the offshore transfers. They're already being sent out. Derek's jaw tightened just slightly. To whom? I didn't blink. Everyone. That was the first time I saw real fear in his eyes. Just for a second. Then, just as quickly, it was gone. He exhaled through his nose, rolling his shoulders. You think this changes anything? He asked. Men like me don't fall because of paperwork, Lucas. You know what happens next, don't you? I didn't answer. But I did. I knew exactly what happened when powerful men started losing control. They got desperate. Derek took a step forward, and instinctively, I braced myself. But then he stopped. His smirk returned, cold and knowing. You don't have the stomach for this. He turned, walking toward his desk, slowly, like he still owned the room. And maybe, in his mind, he did. I'll disappear, he said, almost casually. New names, new accounts, new places. I'll rebuild. And you. He turned to Charlotte. You won't be anything but a footnote in my story. She inhaled sharply. And then, she did something I didn't expect. She laughed. Not loud. Not hysterical. But a bitter, quiet chuckle. Derek's smirk faltered. You don't get it, do you? Charlotte whispered. Derek frowned. Get what? Her voice was quieter now, steadier. For the first time in your life, you have no control. And that was when the siren started. Derek's eyes flicked toward the window, the red and blue lights flashing outside. I took a slow breath, stepping forward. Like I said, it's over. For the first time, Derek Montgomery looked trapped. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Charlotte and I walked out of the building together. She kept her arms wrapped around herself, her breath shaky but steady. Neither of us spoke for a long time. Finally, she broke the silence. What happens now? I looked at her, and I thought about it. For so long, I had wanted revenge. I had wanted to hurt her, to make her feel even an ounce of what I had felt when she walked away from our life together. But now, I just felt tired. You disappear, I said finally. For good. She flinched, like she had been expecting that but hoping for something else. She nodded, looking down at her hands. Yeah, I figured. I sighed, rubbing my jaw. You have a choice, Charlotte. You can try to rebuild from this, or you can keep running. But either way, I can't be part of it. She swallowed, lifting her head. And you? I looked out at the city, the distant hum of sirens still echoing. I start over. For the first time in months, I felt the weight begin to lift. I wasn't Lucas Bennett, the betrayed husband anymore. I wasn't the man left behind. I was just me. And that was enough.